This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 347 of Within the Trenches podcast. And this episode is sponsored by Rapid Deploy as well as In Digital. And, this one's going to be a little bit different. So it's starting out with me talking and everything, but the rest of it is going to be just audio. The reason for that is because the audio that you're going to hear is actually from Response2020. And this is a virtual event that Rapid Deploy put on. I had the honor of, having the opportunity to do Imagine Listening for their event. And it was very powerful. It was an excellent episode. And I wanted to make sure to be able to share the stories that came out of that session with the entire audience. So again, this is episode 347. And a warning that what you're about to hear are some deep stories. But again, they are powerful ones. And it was just excellent to have everyone there, not only in the audience, but those who participated and shared those stories. So without further ado, here is episode 347, Imagine Listening. Imagine getting ready for bed. You've had a long day, and you're ready to rest. You glance outside your window, and you notice a glow. You pull back the curtain, and then frantically search for your phone. Now imagine you're 911, receiving a call from someone whose neighbor's home is in flames. Officers arrive first, and you can hear them over the radio yelling that a person is passed out on the porch and they are unable to get to them. The sound of them yelling over the radio stays with you. This is what it's like within the trenches. In this episode, you'll hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls the 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is a live audience episode, and we're recording live from Response 2020. Today we have some special guests who will be joining us to share stories. Those who are in attendance, you will also have a chance, if you would like to share a story in the QA section. And if there is time, of course, we will read those stories as well. But you may submit those for this first part of Imagine Listening. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who live them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatcher who has taken each call. And imagine listening.
From the time of your first call came in till the moment our boat pulled up on the shore next to you, just know I felt your anguish through the phone. I took calls from all 5 of you, and some of you more than once. Each one I could feel the fear and desperation start to wash over your group. Just know That cell phone ping that pinpointed you on my map was my one beacon of light shining on you in the middle of the river that night. Just know I was holding back my own tears as I sent every unit in my arsenal while I listened to you screaming out for your friend, then screaming to me to help you. Just know I felt the panic as you could see the lights flashing as they drove by, thinking they went too far, not knowing they were coming from all directions to get to you. Just know when my crews were by your side, little do they know, they too were holding me up. Just know, while the search continues for your friend, I am still with you. I am 911.
Thank you for sharing that story. And thank you for the job that you do. Thank you so much.
You called 911 and said that she cut me. You were obviously upset, and I sent all the help that I could send. I told you I would stay on the phone and started asking you about the suspect. You did everything you could, and you answered every question until you went silent. I thought you had put the phone down and walked away. After my units arrived, I was told that you had passed away in the front yard waiting for help. What you meant by "she cut me" was that your girlfriend and her new boyfriend got into a fight with you and that she stabbed you in the chest. You still had the knife in your chest when our units arrived. They both went to jail that day, but I still don't know the outcome of your case. I am 911.
Thank you for sharing that story. You know, that's one of the things, as those who are here in attendance, those who are watching, that's one of the things that we deal with, that there is no closure. In some rare moments, yes, but a lot of times there is not that closure. Thank you again for sharing that story.
I was a primary call taker on a warm day in April. You and your friends were at the local gun club when you had a major heart attack. Your friends called 911 and I answered. I gave instructions and walked them through how to help you until the ambulance could arrive. You stopped breathing at least 5 times during our 15-minute call. Each time, we started CPR again. I kept counting, your friends continued compressions, and you never stopped fighting. Somehow, even after losing you several times, you stayed alive. You are one of my few saves, and 2 weeks later, you came to the sheriff's office and shook my hand. I will never forget you. I am 911.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that story, for coming on and sharing that with us today.
I answered the call while you were filling in for your wife as she was babysitting a small toddler. You called 911, and when I answered, you said the baby was unconscious. And I asked how this happened. You said that he was playing on a little Tyke's playhouse in the playroom inside the house, and he had fallen. And I could hear your hesitation and I just didn't understand, the circumstances. It didn't add up right. I started to walk you through CPR. We had units respond, and the child was airlifted to the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. But before I disconnected with you, I got your name and date of birth. It turns out that he didn't fall from the little Tykes. You shook him. You shook him because you were upset about his crying. I am 911.
Thank you for sharing that story. All of you for sharing your stories. For those who are watching right now, those who are in attendance, if you have a story that you want to submit, please make sure to do that through the Q&A feature. If you scroll down from where you're viewing, you'll be able to find that. I'll be able to see when messages pop up, and I can read one of those stories. Now, with the story that told, that's probably one of the hardest ones. Every call is hard, but ones that deal with children seem to hit the hardest. For myself, one of the calls that will always stick with me, and it was actually one of the stories that I myself had added to the I Am 911 movement, when all of this first started out in 2016. It's one that really rocked me. And the only thing that helped for me was trying to get, that closure, trying to figure out exactly what happened. Because detectives ended up going out there, and it messed me up even more. Now, I get a phone call from a frantic mom saying that her infant is not breathing, blue in the face. And we started doing CPR. And we were doing CPR for a while. And what had happened was the mom's mom, which would be the grandmother, she was visiting. The caller was working a lot and was trying to get a nap in before going in for her shift. And she had 3 children. So grandma's taking care of the infant while she takes a nap, right? And mom wakes up, goes out into the living room, and doesn't see the infant, and asks her mom, where's she at? So she runs back into the room because her mom tells her, well, she fell asleep. I laid her next to you in bed. And the baby somehow rolled off of the bed onto a basket of towels and was unable to lift its head enough and wasn't able to breathe. So, and that information I didn't find out until afterwards. I only had that little bit of information where the grandmother had laid the baby down in the bed, and the mom didn't know, and we're giving CPR, and we're just going and going and going. And then when it's over, my supervisor at the time asks me, so are you okay? And I had said yes. I said, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm okay. But I was not okay. I was not okay at all. And I'm sure she could sense that, especially when they call detectives out there. And my supervisor's husband, he was a sergeant there. He's now a captain, but he was a sergeant at the time. He comes in and he sits next to me and he says, do you want to talk? And I said, well, I don't want to leave my post here. I'm not going to leave my post. I got stuff to do. There's calls coming in and I have a job to do and I'm going to continue doing it. And I said, so just tell me what happened. That's all I need to know and I'll be okay. And he had given me all of that information. Before he had come in, EMS who had gone out there, they called for their times and numbers and I just happened to answer the phone. And they asked me if it was me who took the call. And I said, yes. And they said, well, you did everything that you could, which was good because, a lot of times when we take calls like this, we end up getting into that mode where you start to wonder if you would have switched your line of questioning, if you would have done anything else, would the outcome be different? You start to blame yourself a little bit almost. And that's kind of where I was getting before I got that phone call from EMS. And they said, man, they were doing textbook CPR. You did amazing. You did everything that you could. And I got off the phone with them and I thought, all right, okay, well, at least I know I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing and I did it right. And then after talking to the sergeant, that is where I was able to get that closure. But it's one that will always stick with me. There's triggers here and there for just different things, that it'll pop up. And, but sharing these stories the way we're doing here and the way my guests here did, this is how we manage a lot of those that do haunt us from time to time. It's by sharing those stories and continuing to push and do what you do. And to know that it's okay not to be okay. That you're not weak by asking for help. You know, again, as I was saying before, I was one of those who buried my my calls. And I finally started sharing and realized that it's more that it takes courage and not weak that you ask for help. It was therapeutic to talk about these stories and get them out there. And that's what we're doing here. That's what Imagine Listening is all about. Sharing these stories, no matter how hard they might be. Now, once again, if you have any stories that you want to submit, or if there's a guest that has another story that you would like to share for this first section of I Am 901 for Imagine Listening, please let me know and we can share that story. Because I have several of them that I could share as well. As we're waiting here for other stories to come up and such, you know, when my grandmother passed away, I was the one who took that call. Not anything I ever expected to do, but when you work in an area that you live in, or at least grew up in, because when I worked for Allegan County, it wasn't where I was living at the time, but I grew up in that county. So I knew everyone on the west side. And so when she passed away, like I said, I took that call. It was also an I Am 911 story that I had shared, because it's part of my story. It's part of my career. And every time that you take another 911 call, it's another story in your career. And there's power in that storytelling. It's how people understand what it is that you do every single day, that you're not a drone just answering the phone. That there is so much more to it, that you're with that caller from the beginning to the end. And while you might be calm and cool, you're freaking out right there with them. I know I was. So we've got a story here.
It goes with being as a local dispatcher and having the opportunity to answer 911 to family and friends. It's happened a couple dozen times, I guess, but it's always scary when you answer 911, where's your emergency? And the person on the other line says, Jimmy? And you're like, you know, you suddenly get real tense. Like, wait, this person knows me, but I didn't quite recognize the voice. So when I continued on with the call, I realized it was my best friend, who's also our IT manager for the city. It was his mother. She had been involved in a minor accident, but just to get that, you know, shock moment of hearing someone call your own name when you didn't answer the phone, it just kind of throws you through a quick loop, and then you get back to doing what you're supposed to be doing. And sent police, fire, and EMS, but yeah, it was a relatively minor accident. I am 911.
Yeah, that's one of those things where when you're taking these calls, you also then teeter on the line of, do I tell them who I am? Do I say, yeah, this is, or do you just continue on? For example, I had a few family members who called in on different calls. One of which was one of my aunts. She saw what looked like a break-in in progress. And I knew that we had an officer out in that area already, and they were doing just different checks for those who were on vacations. And she was hysterical. And I had to make that choice. Do I say who I am or do I not? You know, hopefully it'll calm her down if I say who I am, or she's going to feel embarrassed and she's not going to want to talk. So I took that chance, and I said it was me, and my family know me as Richie. So I had said to my aunt, it's Richie. And she goes, oh, I'm so glad that it's you. And thank the Lord that it ended up being going that way. And what it ended up being was the person who was at the house was actually one of my officers who was doing one of those checks. It just happened to be one of those houses there, and he had not called out that he was there at that residence. So that was a little interesting for all of us there at the end, because then we knew where he was at. Now we've got just about 10 or so minutes left of this first portion of Imagine Listening before we go into open mic. And again, if you have any stories at all that you want to submit, please do so. I'm able to see them here. I am 911 stories. And if they don't, if they're unable to be read at the time, I'll be able to add them later to the audio that ends up going out with this. And then we'll go into open mic. We've got some guests for open mic and the stories that we're going to share there on the lighter side of dispatch. Now, again, just to reiterate, it might not seem like we're healing, but by sharing these hard stories, we definitely are. We're healing together and finding some form of closure sharing these stories. Again, that's the power of storytelling. And it's just amazing that we're able to come together to share these stories and have people that understand what it is that you've gone through and might have a similar situation that they've dealt with.
This one needs a little bit of healing, and it's been festering for a while. But prior to us having EMD, of course, we're not able to give the caller instructions of any kind. Our area, some of our areas are rural, so we've got volunteers. Takes a little time for them to get there. Middle of the night, I get an older gentleman calling. Of course, he's frantic. His wife they were watching TV. She has just slumped over in her chair next to him. She's not responding. He is very, very frantic. Tell me what to do. Please just tell me what to do. So I'm getting everybody en route. It's 30 below zero in Wisconsin in the middle of the night. Why aren't they coming? Why aren't they here? They know me. They know where I live. Why are they not here yet? Of course, 30 seconds seems like 3 hours in situations like that. So I'm keeping him talking, trying to think, what are the responders going to need when they get there? What are they going to do? So I said, okay, can you get her off the chair? Like, lay her on the floor. I'm thinking that's the first thing. CPR, they're going to want her out of that chair. And he said, nope, she's too big. I'm too old. I can't do it. Said she was in a recliner. I'm like, we got to do something. Can you lay the recliner back flat? Just get her flat, something. Yep, so he's trying to do that. Still screaming, tell me what to do. Just please tell me what to do. It made my hands tied even more than they already were as far as being able to tell him what to do. So trying to explain to him the response, it's 30 below. They have to warm their vehicles up, get to the shed, warm those vehicles up, get to you. They're coming as fast as they can. Trust me, they're coming. I promise you they're coming. They'll be there any minute. Listening to my responders go en route. And he just keeps saying, please, God, just tell me what to do. And he's calling her name. And I'm running out of things to say to him. So I broke down with him and said, you know what? Sit down next to her, hold her hand, and tell her that you love her. And so he's crying and calling out her name and everything else. And I hear in the background, somebody's pounding at the door. One of my responders went in their private vehicle and got there first, knew who it was, knew what door to go into, knew the layout of the house, that you have to come in from the basement entrance and up and around. So I hear him in the background. the man started screaming to the responder, we're in here, we're in here. And I hung up that call. I hung up because I knew my responders were there and that was their deal. Now, I did find out she didn't make it, but I never want to hang up the phone again after telling someone, hold her hand and tell her you love her, because that's my only option.
Thank you for sharing the story. Thank you so much. You know, you made me kind of flash back with that story. I can feel you. I can feel your pain on that there. It's hard when you have a call like that because that's all you can do, right? And I remember taking a call once where it was two brothers. They were coming home from a funeral for a family member, and his brother, who is on the passenger side, he ends up having a heart attack and is unconscious. And I've got EMS going over there, and it was almost the same type of thing where he was unable to get him out of the car to start CPR. And I'm trying every single thing that I can with this gentleman on the phone. And I remember telling him, because I'm thinking this is the only other thing that I'd be able to do, or that they would be able to do, to try, is to try to make the seat go flat, put it back as far as they can. Now, we all know that they have to be on a flat surface, right, for it to work. But in this case, the brother's so frantic, he just wants anything to be able to help, to do something. And that was the only thing that I could think of at that moment. As he can't get him out of the car, just try to put it all the way back and start. And I won't forget him saying, you know, God, not now. We just lost a family member. And that's actually one of those that I don't know if the brother made it or not. But yeah, sometimes that's all you can say is to be there with the person, because there's not much else that you can do until help gets there. Again, thank you so much for sharing that story. Now, we got one that came in here really quick as we're going into the wrap up of this first portion of Imagine Listening. And it says, I still hear your screams as the vehicle ran over the patient's head as they were lying in the road after a motorcycle accident. I am 911. Thank you for submitting that story, for sharing that. And one last story.
So I do have another story. Part of what we do as dispatchers, we get a lot of calls that are hard, but sometimes we also get hard moments as actually radio dispatchers. I remember a particular night, we had officers dispatched out to a domestic violence. At least a mother and her juvenile son were fighting physically, and so we got our officers responding, and they were looking for this juvenile when across the air, one of our officers goes, that we have an officer down, clear the air. And I remember sitting in that room and all of us just sitting and praying and waiting for more information. And after several minutes, we actually had to status the officer to see what was going on. And all he could tell us was, officer down, CPR in progress. And I remember sitting there and just praying and thinking, what's happened? Did they get ambushed? Did they get hurt? What happened? And eventually, after what seemed forever, probably was only about 5 to 10 minutes, we learned he had a heart attack on duty, and it was not related to the call. But it was that moment of my officer, the person that I work so hard to keep safe, is no longer here. And that's something that I carry with me every day and every shift to make sure I do what I can to help my officers every call.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And for everyone who's come on and to share stories, and of course to the person as well who submitted a story there, thank you so much. We are now at the end of Imagine Listening. I can't thank you enough for everything that you do in this profession and for sharing your stories for the I Am 911 movement. Thank you so much. So those were the stories from Imagine Listening, from Response 2020. Again, a virtual event that Rapid Deploy had put on, and it was just humbling and just awesome to have all of you there to share these stories. And I have no doubt that anyone who listened to those stories, whether it be during that event or now, will get something out of it. Those who've gone through something similar, it's all about putting that out there and supporting one another and being here, together and sharing. We're healing by sharing these stories and getting some form of closure as well. So to everyone who shared a story for the I Am 911 movement and this session, thank you for having the courage, for doing the job that you do every single day is the most vital piece of public safety. Thank you so much. And continue to share those stories, because it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to ask for help as well. And by sharing these stories, that's the first step. So thank you once again for that. And thank you to Rapid Deploy for giving me the opportunity to do the session. For those who have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, that is @911podcast. You can like us on Facebook, that is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. And this episode has been sponsored by Rapid Deploy as well as in digital. And you can hear the flagship show, Within the Trenches, 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone.